Well, as the saying goes, this is where the rubber meets the road. We're going to actually do our first basic edits. Now, what I'd like you to do is step into our predefined projects, 04-02 Basic Edits. And to do this, simply double-click on the project file. The project library will slide off screen to the left, and now you're ready to start editing in your basic timeline. So the first thing we want to do is we want to select a clip and bring it in. Let's start with an interview. Go ahead and select the Interviews keyword collection, and we're going to work with the Pablo interview. Now, in an earlier lesson, we've selected a favorite, a selection of the clip that we really liked, and you'll notice a little green line. If you haven't done this, don't worry about it. I just want to point out the convenience of having selected a favorite. If I wanted to choose this one selection to bring in, I could simply click on the green line, and it's automatically selected. If you haven't already done this, simply go ahead and grab the edge of the frame, or skim over to where you want the interview to start and press the I key to mark an endpoint. Go ahead and hit the space bar to play a selection.
And it's really not just taking the class and having a teacher.
Go ahead and mark an out point, or you could grab the right side of the range and drag it in. And now we're ready to bring the first clip into our timeline. And there's several ways to do this. One of the simplest ways is to simply click on the center of the range. You'll notice that your pointer has turned to a hand, and drag it down and drop it anywhere on the timeline. By default, Final Cut Pro will slide it to the very beginning of your sequence. Congratulations, you've made your first edit. Now let's go ahead and take a look at some other ways that we can bring clips into our timeline. Now obviously, dragging and dropping is very convenient, but you can also use keyboard shortcuts, and you can use these buttons that are in your toolbar. The ones we'll be working with in this movie are the insert and the append. Now, what's the difference between an insert and an append? The append is a new feature in Final Cut Pro 10, and it's the E key. So if I wanted to add another clip very quickly after the first clip, instead of selecting it and then dragging it all the way down, I can simply press E, and it just adds that clip directly after the first one. Let's go ahead and add several clips. We're going to jump over to the B-roll, and don't worry about the specific clip that I'm selecting. Just pick one that you like. So I'm going to go ahead and skim over to a dancing sequence of Pablo. I'll stretch this across. So that's a good chunk. And I'm going to simply hit the E key, and it automatically adds it to the end of my sequence. It's a very quick way to slug a lot of video into your timeline, and then later on we'll learn how to refine these edits. Now I do want you to notice something in the timeline. If you take a look at the interview clips, you'll actually see audio waveforms. That's an indication that this media has both video and audio. If you notice the last clip that I brought in, the third clip in the timeline of Pablo dancing, that's without sound. We're going to be adding some music later on. So just so you have an idea of why some of your clips might have waveforms and some of them might not. So that's the append edit, and the keyboard shortcut is E, and it is one of my favorite edit tools in Final Cut Pro 10. The next edit that I want to look at is called an insert edit. So in this case, I've cut together a couple of interview pieces and Pablo dancing, but I really would love the show to start with maybe Pablo dancing, or maybe we'll just go to this previous one of him stretching and warming up. Again, I'm going to select a range. In this case, I'll just drag it across. Now, if I want to be very specific about the duration of this clip that I'm bringing in, such as, oh, I want about a 5-second pre-roll. Well, once I selected this, if I hit Control D, as in duration, take a look at what happens in the very center of my toolbar in my HUD. I actually see 4,29, so it's 4 seconds and 29 frames. Ironically, I wanted 5 seconds, and I guessed that pretty quick. So we'll change my mind, which I do often, and we'll make that a 3-second insert. So I hit Control D, we see the duration of the selection, and I'm just now going to type in 300 on my numeric keypad and simply hit the Enter key. This will shorten the clip to make sure that I bring in exactly 3 seconds of video, and I'm going to want to put this at the very beginning of my show. Now to do this, I could simply drag my playhead all the way to the beginning, or if I wanted to, I could press the Home key on my keyboard. Now the Home key is located in the space between the numeric keypad on your right and the letters on your left. I press home and I go to the beginning of my show. Now there is a keyboard shortcut for an insert edit. It's the W key, or you could press this button here on the interface. What Final Cut will do is put that 3-second clip at the beginning of your show and move everything to the right by 3 seconds. Now I want to show you this is a very powerful tool. If I wanted to, I could actually split a clip in half and do an insert edit. So if I wanted to go over and select, say, another range of Pablo dancing, and if I did an insert edit at this point and press the W key, you'll see Final Cut puts the clip in between the interview. Now, sometimes you may want to do this if you want to split up a soundbite. Other times, if you want to do it as B-roll or as a cutaway, you'll do that a little bit differently. That's called a connected clip, and we'll look at that in a later movie. So now you know the basic ways of getting clips into your timeline. Select the part of the clip you want, and you can drag it in, or use one of the keyboard shortcuts, E to add it to the end, or an append edit, or W to do an insert edit. And remember, when doing an insert edit, the insert happens exactly where the playhead is parked. Remember, if you want to quickly jump between edits, select your timeline, and then you can use the up and down arrow keys to jump your playhead to previous or subsequent edits. Now, before we move on, I do want to point out one more thing that I hinted at the very beginning of this movie, and that's the magnetic timeline. If I grab a clip, let me go ahead and select a pretty short range of a clip, and I'm going to drag this down to my timeline, and I'm going to drop it over here to the far right. You'll notice when I let go that the magnetic timeline grabs that clip and drags it all the way and connects it to the last clip in the timeline. This is important because what Final Cut is trying to do is keep you from having what's called a flash frame or a visual gap in your program. Now, we'll learn in a later movie how you can create a gap or a placeholder if you want that space, but by default, Final Cut tries to keep you out of trouble.